How did alien species become gods and goddesses on Earth? I am your host and guide, Matias De Stefano. In this episode, we will dive into the origin of our mythology. The society we have today was created through the ideas of politicism and monotheism. Monotheism through Christianity and Judaism and Islam, and politicism through the ideas of Rome and the civilization they created through the Republic and the Empire, and Greece, the idea of philosophy. So these two paths through understanding the divine on Earth were taken from different ideas that came from just one spot. Monotheism was trying to explain how the universe was just one mind, one being expressing in many different ways. And these ways were the phases of the polytheism that honor every one of them in order to be related and to download information of God in different perspectives and different dimensions. So everyone could have a way we could connect with the wills, with the wisdom, with the love of God in different perspectives. This main idea of how polytheism and monotheism were built in history of humanity was also bounded to the idea of other beings coming from different planets and different stars. That is why we sometimes had confusion when we talk about gods, goddesses, and priests and priestesses. The idea of human gods on Earth was created in Atlantean time, and it was guided by the Arcturians and the Orion people. So we could recognize the power that we had within in our blood and in our cells through the DNA. They said that every god in reality was just a projection. So what we have to do was to honor the sun as a projection of God, and after that we had to become the sun ourselves. So the seek of enlightenment was to transform humans in suns, in moon, in stars on Earth. The main concept of the universal God and Goddess was to understand that the divine was divided in different levels of consciousness. So every dimension has a way to understand the divine, and in the matter, the divine was understood through nature. Nature was the first code to understand how everything worked and how the universe worked. Life was coming through water, so we put a divine into every water and we split it in different levels of water. The sea god, the rain, the lakes, the river. So we had different perspectives of what the water was. That happened also with the fire, with earth, with air, and every concept of nature, like plants, like animals, had their way to be understood through the different shapes to get to the main core. And that is why for us, the biggest concept of gods were the ones coming from the sky. Moon, sun, the stars, those were the concepts that created our realities on Earth. And we thought they were separated. We understood that the skies and all the concepts in the unreachable reality were the most divine, and then the ones we could touch were the ones that were created in order to us to be in touch with the realities above. That's why we compare the flowers with the light of the sun, and we reach the enlightenment of the sun through the petals of the flowers. And that's where the idea of chakras and enlightenment came from. So for us, the different realities that we have seen every day, that help us to understand the power of creation in this reality, would help us to understand the idea of that we were all connected through this God in different shapes. So this was something that every human, since the very beginning when we started to realize who we were on Earth, this was the concept that bound us all, that every human in every part of the world understood that all the concepts from above, the sun, the moon, the stars, were the ones creating this reality on Earth, and they were creating us through their image. So that is why when in history the Aisir, the Nemnir, Alithir, and other beings from the Confederation and not from the Confederation, all of them started to come to this planet from the skies, and that made the idea for humans to understand that if those people came from the stars, so they are gods from the stars. They are the ones bringing that creation, that information. That created for us the idea that those beings coming from the sun, from the stars, from the moon, were the beings that represented the divine on Earth, and that is why we begin to treat them like gods and goddesses. At the first time in humanity, when we started to recognize the divine, we use vibration words to define the energy of every god. So that's why we call the giver of the spirit like An, and other words like Mu, like Ath. They were concepts of humans to put some vibrations in the understanding of everything. Ha, Ar, Ing were words that represented the divine in like a package of information. When we were saying Ar or An, we were talking about the sky. So we were, every word or every information that we were willing to give to our kids, to other cultures, when we would say Ar or An, these two words would represent all information in just one small sentence. So this vibration would represent the whole package of information of the skies. So when Aisir came and they saw that we were naming these concepts of gods of the universe with different vibration, with different names, so what they did was to say to people that they were those An, Ar, Ing, those vibrations on blood. So every one of them took the name of the gods, of the divine that we try to understand. So when we were willing to talk to the sun, now we had to go to a temple, and this temple was the house of this being. So they would say, if you want to honor the sun, you have to come and give something to me so I can give the message to the sun. And this created an idea of pyramidal civilization in which the divine was only achieved through the gods on earth. This disconnected humanity from the process of the Trinity, from the process of the realities that we were trying to achieve in the divine. And it created the idea that these gods and goddesses were the only ones that we could talk to whom we could relate to. So that's why we weren't scared of them. We took them like gods, and they could do whatever they wanted with us because we understood that they were those messengers of gods here on earth. During the process of creation of humanity and the society of humanity, this Aisir, this Annunaki, was spreading in the world. They were trying to conquer every human species and every human idea of the creation. So that's why they were against the first two species that were trying to help us with the wisdom. Those were the Nemnir and the Sofhir. The Nemnir were the voices of nature on earth. So they were called the giants or the gods, the first gods on earth that were the keepers of information of this planet and the nature. The Sofhir were the next ones that gave us the information of the tree of life, the wisdom of how everything was created. So that's why the snake was related to this tree that gave us the fruit of wisdom. and they worked by themselves alone in separate regions. So they were really difficult to get. They were really difficult to be in touch with. So the concepts of Nemnir and Sofhir for humans were really difficult to achieve. So that's why Aisir were so important for humans, because they were related with humans most than other species, and they claimed to be the protectors of humanity, even if half of them were trying to control us. So that's why the Aisir started to fight the first species like Nemnir and Sofhir, so they could rule the whole world. And they claim themselves like those protecting humans from the species like snakes and the giants. Aisir took the idea that humanity understood that they were gods, and because they came from the skies, and they started to control every civilization and every species that they were creating like the messengers of the divine. They became the middle point to connect the self with humanity. And that's why when humans were ready to become the species to control the planet, the other new giants came to this planet, who were the Arcturians, the Orion people, and Syrian people. These people came after all the mess that Aisir had created in this planet, and they said, we are the new messengers from other dimensions. We are bounded to the fifth and the sixth dimension, and they were just using you to reach their own goals in this planet. So that's why they were split in those who were protecting humanity and those who were pretending that they were protecting humanity. And they sent them all to what we now call hell, which is in the underground. The keepers of the underground would take them in the underground cities so humans could be rulers of the new civilization, of the new world. That's how Arcturians, Orion people, and Sirius people, they became the new gods for humans. But they were not called gods. I remember one of them that we used to call Yusa, and she was someone that was called a god on earth, that she was teaching to people how to relate with the divine on the stars. And I remember one of the Atlantean people asking her in the temples of the desert, why are you allowing that people call you God if you are not a god? And she would say, I never said to them to be called God, but I am a part of God. So I don't have any problem with people believing who I am, because I am. So they were teaching people how to become gods. And if they would say they were not gods, we would never want to reach their same level of consciousness. We wanted to be like them. So that's why they allowed people to call them gods, so we could reach the idea of how to be a god. So that's why Arcturians, Orion people, were called gods, but they were not forcing people to be called like that. These beings, they prepare humans to make the path to become gods and goddesses on earth. And these teachings, after the Aisir were sent to the underground, these teachings created the idea of civilizations becoming divine on earth. And that's why they taught their sons, the sons in Mu, in Hem and Hef, Atlantis, they taught them how to do the path to become divine on earth. And those were the first priests and priestesses that incarnated the concepts of the divine of other dimensions on earth. And that's how the people from Atlantis, for all the humans, became also the concepts of gods.